And you can't just ignore that there are security things that go on above ground and underground that most of us will never see.
The president bulldozed the East Wing, didn't go to Congress to ask,
but now he's going to Congress
even once, to approve a plan. Nobody even knows what the plan is because he just changes it every 3 months based on his grandiose ideas.
And the cost keeps going up.
And the cost keeps going up. Where's the oversight? Is this $1 billion? This is $1 billion blank check.
In today's video, Abby Phillip fact-checked Scott Jennings on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as tensions explode over Donald Trump's White House ballroom project and rising concerns about taxpayer spending. Scott Jennings defends the administration, but Abby Phillip fact-checks key claims live on CNN, sparking a heated debate over costs, funding, and government priorities. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Scott Jennings on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
Brad, what in the bait and switch is this?
Well, what I would tell you is if Democrats had not been willing to fund the Department of Homeland Security and not shut the government down, we would not have this reconciliation vehicle, which can be passed.
Okay.
The leader, Senator Thune and Speaker Johnson were not planning on doing this. There was going to be no vessel for this to happen. Democrats forced them to do this, and so now the president's...
Democrats
so you support the ballroom.
Republicans.
I do support the ballroom.
You support
We need a ballroom. The Obama administration thought we needed a ballroom. We need a ballroom.
Like as recently as a week ago, right after the White House Correspondents' Dinner attempted shooting, the DOJ ran to court 2 days afterwards to argue in front of the judge who has put the injunction on the construction about the need to build this ballroom. And in that legal filing that was done last week, Trump's DOJ, that thing read like a Trump tweet. It said over and over, it's going to be free. It's a gift from me to the American people. It's not going to cost anything. So the problem is not the vessel that it's on. The problem is not the shutdown. The problem is that Trump lied and that he said over and over again. First, it started as a $300 million project that was going to be paid by his cronies, the tech titans and all the donors that want to kowtow to him. Then it got to $400 million. I don't know what the hell happened to that $400 million because I thought it had already been raised. But now they want an additional $1 billion coming from my pocket at a time when Americans can't pay for gas. So therein lies the problem.
I do not even understand. I really am trying to understand. If you're Republicans, you know you're facing potentially a tsunami come the fall. Just the history is not in your favor this year. Gas prices are $4.50 across the country. And they decide on this day in March, Cinco de Mayo, that what they want to do is announce $1 billion in May, $1 billion for a ballroom.
Well, if I may serve as the clerk of the table, I'll read you from the bill. None of the funds made available under this section may be used for non-security elements of the East Wing modernization project. That is direct text from the bill. Now,
I don't think that matters it doesn't matter even one scintilla because...
It doesn't?
No, it doesn't. Because, first of all,
but that's in the bill?
The president said that the project would cost $400 billion and that it would be entirely paid for by private donations. So now, to then come and say after the fact, well, there are security upgrades that we need to make, and it's going to cost 2.5 times that amount, in addition to the $400 billion, that is a bait and switch for the American people.
What really stands out in this heated exchange is how sharply it highlights the gap between political messaging and how government funding actually works. In Washington, even projects described as privately funded often still rely on indirect federal mechanisms like procurement rules, security allocations, or agency-backed infrastructure upgrades. That's why watchdog groups like the Congressional Budget Office consistently flag how off-budget claims can still translate into public cost once security, staffing, and compliance requirements are added in. There's also a long history of major White House construction and renovation projects quietly expanding beyond their original price tags, past administrations, including both Republican and Democratic ones, have seen federal facility upgrades balloon due to security requirements from agencies like the Secret Service, which often mandate expensive structural changes that aren't part of the original private fundraising pitch. That context is important because it explains why skepticism tends to rise whenever large symbolic projects are framed as cost-free to taxpayers. Even if private donors contribute upfront, federal law enforcement standards, classified infrastructure needs, and long-term maintenance almost always shift some burden back onto public resources. The broader issue here is transparency. When political leaders give simplified cost assurances, but the underlying legal and logistical framework allows for additional federal spending later, it creates distrust regardless of party affiliation. That distrust is reinforced when independent analyses and budget experts repeatedly warn that zero taxpayer cost claims are rarely sustainable once security and operational realities are factored in. Ultimately, the debate reflects a familiar pattern in modern politics: competing narratives about fiscal responsibility versus the hidden complexity of how federal projects are actually financed and executed.
I think that's a valid argument. On the other hand, having worked at the White House, Van was there as well, you've been there. There are security things at the White House that have to be done. I mean, it is the most secure government building in the world. It is a military base, and you can't just ignore that there are security things that go on above ground and underground that most of us will never see.
The president bulldozed the East Wing, didn't go to Congress to ask.
But now he's going to Congress.
Even once to approve a plan. Nobody even knows what the plan is because he just changes it every 3 months based on his grandiose ideas.
And the cost keeps going up.
And the cost keeps going up. Where's the oversight? Is this $1 billion? This is $1 billion blank check.
I don't know if anybody's driven by there lately. Okay, there's a hole in the ground.
Yes,
we're not going to
leave
leave it indefinitely, nor should we leave it. Brad is right. Every administration has said we need a ballroom, we need a better facility. A. B, it does need to be secure. C, as much of it as possible needs to be paid for by private donations, just as the president said. But to me, I think it's sort of cheap point scoring to say we can't worry about funding to make sure that the White House is secure for the commander-in-chief of the United States.
Let's be clear. The White House is secure, okay? The White House is secure. What Trump wants to do is over and above that, and that might be fine. But I think there is an argument to be made that instead of after the fact, you bulldoze the thing first and then say, well, we can't leave the hole there. We got to fill it.
But this is how the White House has always been.
I mean, that's
By the way,
a
may I
wild thing to
remind you
do.
that right now the Trump administration has been trying to prosecute the Fed chair over cost overruns for the renovation.
The last time we had a White House renovation, Harry Truman just didn't ask Congress. And now the president is going to Congress. I was told 3 months ago that the problem
What White House renovation are you talking about? You talking about the interior?
Yes, South Portico.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
but
and the construction on the exterior of the building.
We've been down this road before, okay? There are different types of renovations. Most of the major renovations, structural renovations to the White House, have in fact been approved by Congress.
That's what's about to happen.
Well, hold on. There is a fund that the president has available to him to make changes, and I'm sure President Trump has already dipped into it to make the marble black in the colonnade and to add text to the exterior of the Oval Office and all of that. There are different tranches of funds. So there are different issues at play here. And $400 million plus another $1 billion is a very different quantity of money. That's what we're talking about.
What really stands out in this exchange is how often federal building projects end up being far more complicated than the political messaging that surrounds them. On paper, proposals for White House upgrades or additions can sound straightforward, but in reality they trigger a long chain of federal oversight involving agencies like the Secret Service, the National Park Service, and budget review processes that can significantly expand both scope and cost. Even when private donations are promised as the main funding source, history shows that they rarely cover the full picture. The visible construction might be privately funded, but security upgrades, underground infrastructure changes, communication systems, and compliance with federal building standards typically fall under government responsibility because they are tied directly to national security requirements. Those elements are not optional, and they cannot legally be fully outsourced to private donors. There is also a consistent pattern documented by federal oversight bodies like the Government Accountability Office, showing that large government construction projects frequently exceed initial estimates. This usually happens not because of intentional mismanagement, but because early projections don't fully account for design changes, security revisions, or regulatory requirements that emerge once planning begins in detail. That's why skepticism tends to rise when cost estimates shift after construction has already started. Even if the intent is to limit taxpayer burden, the structure of federal infrastructure work makes it very difficult to guarantee a fixed price upfront. Ultimately, the core issue is transparency, making sure the public clearly understands what is privately funded, what is federally required for security, and what costs may eventually fall back on taxpayers once all legal and safety requirements are fully applied.
Will you be okay now that it goes to the White Congress?
But I guess, he did say that it was going to be free to the American people. And I assume that when he thought about his ballroom, he didn't think it was going to be insecure. He probably thought it was going to be secure. So if he wants $1 billion to make it secure for our free ballroom that he promised us, he needs to go to his billionaire friends and get another $1 billion. I don't understand why.
They're busy paying for the Met Gala.
All I want to say is that people aren't dumb. It's like he said he was going to give us a free ballroom. We didn't ask for it, and he didn't ask permission for it, but that's what he wanted to do. And now he's sticking us with a massive bill for it. Now, you can then say, but it's for security. Well, you should have thought about that before you started tearing down the White House.
Well, I think
and how much it's going to cost.
The problem is, and I love you both, but you guys are getting played by this president. At the end of the day, he promised to lower costs, and he's building this ballroom. You have to sit here and defend him every single day. Gas prices have gone up. He's trying to sabotage the midterm elections. Like, this man is not doing anything to help the Republican Party whatsoever. And if I were a Republican on the Hill, or if I were sitting at this table and my Democratic president were to be doing that, I would be pissed, and I would be out here, and I'd be calling the White House every day saying, you're about to lose us the election, but the Republican Party won't do that. And I don't understand why.
Let me ask you about this reconciliation bill that you love so much.
I didn't say I loved it.
Let me show you what else. Let's talk.
I love it.
Just for a second, because I think it's important. The ballroom is the ballroom, but look at what else is in it. Another $32.2 billion for ICE, $26 billion for CBP, another $5 billion for DHS, and just a little sliver, $1.5 billion for the Justice Department. Keep those numbers in mind. Also keep in mind that nothing in this bill is paid for. So this is just adding to the deficit. Also keep in mind that last year, in the big, beautiful bill, ICE's budget was basically exploded. They were given over $70 billion.
To solve a mandate that the president got in the election.
Let me just ask you realistically, where is all of this money going? And does one agency need to be suddenly, it's not DOD, the second largest agency in the entire country?
Well, if you want to say that we should have the DHS bill and DHS funding debated and worked out in a bipartisan way, then Democrats have to drop the filibuster in the Senate and negotiate it and vote for it on the floor and offer amendments. But Democrats refuse to bring that debate to the Senate floor. They won't let the Senate talk about it. So now Republicans are going to have to do it in reconciliation. This is all those projects you mentioned, except for the DOJ, come under the Department of Homeland Security. This is the thing Democrats are refusing to debate, to amend, to compromise.
I'm not hearing you justify the budget.
Well, look, the president got a mandate to say, wait a minute.
It's a lot of money, and I think, again, the American people are asking themselves, where is our money going?
Well, wait a minute. I thought it's obvious.
You told us when Trump started, it was about saving money waste, fraud, and abuse.
Doge
No,
Bell.
wait a minute.
The whole thing. We're talking about a DHS budget that's now
hold on.
over $100 billion.
Federal government
What are we
employment,
talking
if federal
about
government
here?
employees, full-time equivalent employees of the federal government is lower than it's been at any point in 20 years. They did, in fact, cut out waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah,
and they're working on it more.
And now there's new race, fraud, and abuse with this ballroom.
What really drives this is the gap between political messaging and how federal money actually moves once it hits Washington's budget system. Large spending packages often sound simple when they're announced, but once they go through reconciliation and agency allocations, the details become much harder to follow and even harder to unwind. A big part of the issue is how agencies like the Department of Homeland Security are funded. According to long-term federal budget tracking from the Congressional Budget Office, DHS spending has generally trended upward over time, driven by enforcement operations, contracting, and infrastructure costs that don't always get discussed in public debates. That's why concerns about sudden multi-billion-dollar increases tend to raise eyebrows among budget analysts. Reconciliation bills also play a major role here because they allow funding to pass with limited bipartisan negotiation. That process is often criticized by government accountability groups for reducing amendment opportunities and compressing debate on extremely large spending decisions. Once those funds are locked in, they are difficult to revise without another major legislative push. There's also the broader issue of how federal spending is framed. Even when officials talk about reducing waste or improving efficiency, data from federal workforce and procurement reports shows that overall costs can still rise due to contracts, security operations, and long-term program commitments rather than staffing alone. So the real tension isn't just about one project or one department, it's about how billions in federal dollars are allocated, justified, and sustained over time in a system where speed and political strategy often outweigh full transparency and bipartisan review. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.